ॐ विश्वं दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरी तुल्यन्निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिरिवोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यस्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये बीजस्यान्तरिवाङ्कुरो जगदिदं प्राङ्निर्विकल्पं पुनः मायाकल्पितदेशकालकलना वैचित्र्यचित्रीकृतं मायावीव विजृम्भयत्यभिमहायोगी वयस्वेच्छया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् So we are seeing the conditions of perceptual error and conditions which are necessary conditions and not necessary, not essential. So perceptual error, well, definitely is based on perception, and perception has three components. Then if perceptual error must be having a error from either of the three. What is that three? Pramata, Pramanam and Prameya. So if there is a defect in a Pramata, the knower, there will be a perceptual error. It's a one condition. Second is if there is a defect in a Prameya, object, then there is a perceptual error. And if there is a defect in a Pramana, the means of knowing, then also there can be a error. These are the conditions, definitely. But these are not necessary conditions. They are not essential conditions. If Pramata, the knower, also does not have any kind of a defect, then also perceptual error can happen. Means of knowing are also healthy, still perceptual error can happen. And the object generally, object of knowledge, object of perception rather, generally does not have a error. And still, let us say some error is there, some defect is there rather, then also perceptual error can happen. But even if all the three are proper, like everyone is seeing a blue sky, everyone is seeing a blue sky. Now here that is not a question at all. If suppose a perceptual error called seeing a blue sky, has defect on a knower, the perceptor, then all are defective, all the knowers have a defect, but we cannot say that way. And means of knowing also are proper. Still that there is a seeing of a perception of a blue sky, and the sky basically has no defect. I mean that ether on which you are superimposing blueness, etc., that also has no defect. It is defect free actually. So still perceptual error happens. Therefore they are not essential conditions of a perceptual error. The essential condition of a perceptual error is ignorance. That's the only thing. Ignorance is the essential condition. And so ignorance, let us take that rope snake. So avidya, he conceals the rope, and on its place snake is projected. And what kind of a snake? Advaitin says, it has a apurva satta. Apurva satta means it has been originated in that place at that time by that person, and that is due to my ignorance. not anybody's ignorance. Everybody has got a fraction of ignorance. I mean, upadhi, vyashti upadhi, avidya. Small upadhi it is, vyashti. We call it mula vidya. From that, a fraction of ignorance arises, because of which and it conceals the rope, and in its place a snake is seen or snake is perceived. And this because and so well, and now in place of a snake you see a rope, so ignorance is gone. But if no ignorance is gone, still being a very small fraction of the mula vidya, still the mula vidya continues. It's just a small fraction of avidya has gone. So mula vidya, which is self-ignorance, continues. And therefore, that is why even if a rope ignorance goes away, one will not become a wise person knowing the self, because the mula vidya still continues. So only tula vidya. In that tula vidya, always there will be plus minus. I mean, plus minus means you definitely, as in a life, you know varieties of the things, and therefore a ignorance pertaining to the creation, jagat, objects, go. But still mula vidya will continue. That's a main upadhi of a jiva for self-ignorance. Anyway, and so this apurva of a sarpa is projected on the rope. So, I mean, apurva means puram na vidyate. That snake is born. Later we are going to connect this particular line. The snake is born at that time on that particular rope by that person. Before that, the snake was not there. The snake is born there. When you experience the birth of the snake is there. So the perception of the snake, the experience of a snake and the very existence of snake are together. I'm going to connect it later. So this is we have to understand apurva satta. Satta means existence. Existence of that snake is apurvam. Purvam na vidyate. Before that it was not. At that time, on that place, by that person, due to ignorance. And that is the condition, the essential condition of a perceptual error. Now this is a perceptual error, which is very subjective. And avidya has played its part. And there is a perceptual error, collective also. And that is this is a blue sky when you say, or this is a blue ocean, blue lake, etc., etc. So this kind of a collective illusion also is there, not just subjective, done by all. Still it is an error, perceptual error, that is possible. And I gave you several examples, not just these other examples also I gave you. When the train moves, you always feel, even though your train moves, you feel the other train is moving, etc., etc. Or you are sitting in a boat and you are going, you feel the water is flowing very fast and you are at one place. Several examples. Acharya gave example of in Atmabodha, he gave an example of a moon. And the moon, on a full moon night, the full moon is there, and then below that there are clouds. And due to the wind, the cloud moves. You feel the clouds are standing into that place, and this moon is moving very fast in other direction. This is also happening to everyone. And therefore, so perceptual error, it's at a subjective level or collective, at this Vyashti and Samashti level, both are possible. And we are taking this example of a perceptual, understanding the example of a perceptual error ultimately for understanding the relationship of a Brahman and Jagat. And so, by taking example of a Rajju Sarpa or any other example. So, same way this, just as the snake superimposed upon the rope due to the ignorance of the rope, and snake is basically mithya because it is superimposition, rope is a reality. Same way, basically the world is superimposed upon Brahman. There is ignorance of the Brahman or the self, And so one superimposes Brahman on, one superimposes Jagat on the Brahman. Same way Jagat is all Mithya and Brahman is Satya. And therefore let's compare totally with the example now, Rajju Sarpa. Analogy. So this Rajju Sarpa analogy, let us compare. Now Sarpa is basically Pratibhasika, subjective. And Rajju is Vyavaharika Satta, experienced by all. Sarpa is experienced by the particular person, at that place, at that time, by that person only. So it is Pratibhasikam. And Rajju is experienced by all. Same way. Well, so remove the Rajju, place Brahman now. So Brahman also is a Vyavaharika Satta, experienced by all. Brahman is experienced by all. And Jagat is Pratibhasika. And so superimposed upon like a Sarpa. No, that's not the case. Even though we are taking the example, analogy, but basically analogy holds good only for the essential points you are having in the mind. Anyway, so there could not be similarity in every aspect between analogy and for this our Brahman and Jagat, etc. So analogy is basically intended to us to see the problem and find the solution ultimately. So wherever there is a perceptual error, there is something kalpitam, and which requires a adhisthana. So this much is the analogy. Wherever there is a superimposition, there is something kalpitam, which requires a adhisthana. There is no niradhisthana Brahma. Error without adhisthana, perceptual error without adhisthana is not possible. Adhisthana is always required. And definitely we can ask a ontological or metaphysical or a reality status of this rope. They can definitely ask. Or of snake. So it is Pratibhasikam, etc. That is okay. And rope is a Vyavaharika, it's okay. But Brahman is a Paramarthika and world has a Vyavaharika Satta, because world is experienced by all, not Brahman is experienced by all. To experience Brahman by all, it should become an object of perception by all. Simple. Because you are totally comparing with the example. Rope is available for perception by all, objectified by all. And therefore, same way, Brahman should be experienced by all. But Brahman cannot be objectified by anybody. And therefore, ultimately being a subject, naturally. And therefore, in fact, what happens is the thing becomes more and more subtler, becomes more pervasive and less objectifiable. That's how it is. More pervasive. The thing which is subtle, it becomes, if any object becomes, when subtle and subtle, becomes more pervasive and less objectifiable, like water and water vapor. Water is available for perception, less pervasive. When it becomes a water vapor, more pervasive, less objectifiable. You cannot objectify easily. So Brahman, which is very subtle, subtlest of the subtle, Anoha Aniyan, and therefore it is the most pervasive and not at all objectifiable by anybody. This is just by some little logic. But anyway, Brahman's nature of the Brahman is such which is not available for any kind of a experience. In fact, what is the essence of the experience, and which before experience, what is presupposed and which is the basis of all the experiences, cannot be available for experience, which is available before experience, because of which all experiences are possible, because of which the triad of experience is possible. That is not available for experience. It is not a part of experience. It is not an object of experience. It is not a prameya at all. And therefore, this cannot be compared. Just as Rajju is a Vyavaharika Satta and Sarpa is a Pratibhasika, same way Jagat is a Pratibhasika and Brahman is a Vyavaharika. And that is not true. That's not true. With the Shruti support, we will have to assume one more reality. In fact, Jagat is not like a Sarpa. Jagat is not like a Sarpa. Jagat is available for experience for everyone, like rope, including rope. And therefore, Jagat has a Vyavaharika Satta. And with the Shruti support, we say Jagat is also Adhyastha, Kalpitam, definitely Kalpitam. But, and Brahman is Adhisthana. But then it has much more reality. Naturally, Adhishthanam is more real compared to what is superimposed. The locus of superimposition has a more reality, and therefore we are forced to assume one more reality called Paramarthika Satta. And that is how we have a three-tier theory so far as this ontological status of the whole thing is concerned. Anyway, so there is no Niradhisthana Brahma. And so Brahman is a Paramarthika Satta, world is a Vyavarika Satta. And relation, of course, is like that. Relation, whatever the relation is there between Rajju and Sarpa, well, that relation is there. Satyamithya relation is there here also between Brahman and Jagat. So, Adhyasa Adhisthana relation is there. Now, a little difficulty is there here. See, Adhyasa Adhisthana relationship is, in case of a Rajju Sarpa, it is a Vishama Satta. So basically, Vishama Satta means both have a different ontological status. Rajju has a Vyavarika Satta, and our Sarpa has a Pratibhasika Satta. Both have a different ontological status. That's called Vishama Satta. This relationship has two things. I mean, the relationship between the two. Of course, it is there, but both have a different types of reality. And what happens in Vedanta is we are not confined to one example. In fact, Upanishad does not give a Rajju Sarpa example. It is Bhashyakara's example. You won't find in any Upanishad mantra anywhere this kind of a Rajju Sarpa example. In fact, there is another example. To explain the relationship between the Jagat and Brahman, they give an example of a pot and clay. They always give that example of a pot and clay. And that's a different relationship. Pot and clay, samasattaka relationship. Ontologically, both have a same reality. Either a pot or a clay. And therefore, clay is Adhishthanam and pot is Adhyaropa. Clay is a Swarupa of the pot basically. Any side of the pot is basically clay. That's the weight of the pot, and everything that that whole thing. Clay of weight of the pot is the weight of the clay, and the touch of the pot is touch of a clay, taste of the pot is taste of a clay, etc. So basically, so pot here in the clay pot is a transformation of the clay. Pot is a transformation of a clay, and which clay is Adhisthana, pot is Adhyaropa, Kalpita, we have to say that. Like gold ornament, also you can take an example. In Chandogya, there are several examples. Mritpinda, etc. In that, Vacharambanam, Vikaro, Namadheyam, Mrittika, Itteva Satyam. So Mrittika is Adhisthana Satyam. And whatever the forms are there, which are the really transformation of the clay. There is a transformation of a clay. No, Swamiji, clay remains clay in the pot. That's true, but the clay form has undergone a transformation of a pot form. You cannot give totally, this example is very contrary to the example of a rope snake. Rope does not at all, even form of a rope does not change. What was there before and what at the time of a superimposition and later also, rope is just rope. Not an iota of a change. That is not the case with the pot and clay. Clay definitely the form. Let us say nature exam. I am going to say that. So, clay form transforms into pot form, and both have a same reality. Pot, the reality of the pot is the same, the reality of the clay, which is not the case. The clay reality of a snake is of a different order, and Pratibhasika, etc. And the pot, the rope is a Vyavarika. So anyway, so basically both these examples are there. We have to resolve the issue. Which example should be taken to understand the relation between Jagat and Brahman. Anyway, and so ultimately this even pot is also Kalpita on the rope. Pot is Kalpita on the clay, and the snake is Kalpita on the rope. And and I can use the ontological term for Kalpita. I can use the term Mithya. And so what is Kalpita? Well, definitely what is Mithya? has no status, no existence, no nature of its own. That's all. So it derives its existence. What is Kalpita derives its existence, its nature, and its status from the Adhisthana. That's all. And that way I will, because I want to resolve both the examples. Ultimately, because all the acharyas sometimes give Rajju Sarpa example, sometimes give pot clay example, sometimes give gold ornament example, and person can find a fault with that, but we have to resolve it ultimately. And so we are in a process of resolving that. So basically this derives the existence, I mean the Kalpita derives its existence, its status, its nature only from the Adhisthana. So of course in the example of a clay pot, clay is empirically real, pot is also empirically real. So it's a samasakta, and still pot is Kalpita, and our what we want to derive from the example, either a rope snake or a clay pot, is this: Kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupam. What is superimposed? Well, definitely it derives its existence, its nature, its status only from the adhisthana, and that is what we call Kalpita. So in that case, both have, well, pot, existence of a pot, nature of a pot, and the status of a pot is due to adhisthana called clay. Same way, in a rope snake also, the existence of a snake and the status of a snake and the very nature of the snake, well, ultimately is derived from the rope only. That way both are Kalpita. Kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupa. And so in the case of a Rajju Sarpa, it is a Vishama Sattaka, different ontological status. Both have a different ontological status. Rope has empirical reality, snake has a subjective reality. They sometimes call phenomenal reality also. Anyway, so that snake has a Pratipasika Satta. Now what relationship is there between Brahman and Jagat? It's a Vishama Sattaka. Vishama Satta. Okay? Jagat is Mithya and Brahman don't have the same reality, and don't say that. Whatever is the reality of the Jagat, that's a reality of the Brahman. No, that's not. Why? Because Jagat is just nothing but the manifest Maya only, and then Maya is definitely is Mithya, and therefore Jagat also is Mithya. That is okay. Kalpita is okay. That way pot also is Mithya. But then Maya is basically non-separate from the Brahman. The very existence of the Maya and is due to Brahman, and therefore the Jagat also is non-separate from Brahman, and so Jagat is Mithya, Jagat is Kalpitam, Brahman is Satyam, but different order of a reality. Brahman is basically Paramarthika Satta, and Jagat has a Vyavaharika Satta, etc. etc. So analogy is basically not a conclusive argument, it is only suggestive argument, and wherever it holds good, we should take that much part from the example, I mean. So we can take any example, I mean ultimately now, rope snake or a clay pot. Clay pot is an example of a parinama, basically Rajju Sarpa is an example of a vivarta, and so there is actual transformation of a clay form into pot form, clay modified into pot, whereas rope remains rope. Before you see the snake also it was a rope. During your superimposition of a snake, I mean when you are seeing a snake also, then also it is a rope. And even after snake resolves, I mean the dhyasa resolves, well, still after bada of the snake also, negation of the snake also, it remains rope. So and still it appears as a snake, and so it is a case of a vivarta. So anyway, whatever example we give, principle is same. What? Principle is one, which we have derived from both the example, is Kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupam. Kalpitasya, what is superimposed? Well, is basically derived its existence, nature, status from the adhishthanam only. And same way, well, we can definitely say this Jagat basically also is Kalpitam, because the existence of the Jagat, the nature of the Jagat, etc., and the status of the Jagat, everything ultimately derives from the Brahman. Because the Jagat also, the nature of Jagat means Asti Bhati Priyam is the nature ultimately of anything. Because otherwise you say the nature of Jagat is Jadam. That is true. But then basically, whatever essence of everything that is nature is Asti Bhati Priyam, which is derived from. And the very status of every name and form, the existence of a name and form and the status of a name and form, if you remove Asti Bhati Priyam, it is gone. There is nothing left over. So very status of the Jagat, the nature of the Jagat and the existence of the Jagat is due to Adhishthanam called Brahman. And therefore Brahman is Satyam, Adhishthanam is Satyam, Jagat is Kalpitam Mithya. So this much is only important from analogies. This much is important. Not Samasattaka and Vishamasattaka and etc. Nothing of that sort. Whether you can give a pot clay example, or you can give a gold ornament example, or you can give a Rajju Sarpa example, ultimately, basically, our important point is this much only. And then somebody asked the question, well, how can you operate with one principle, both the cases, Rajju Sarpa and clay pot example, etc.? Well, because there is a principle of economy that's applicable everywhere. Principle of economy. If by one hypothesis if I can explain more facts, then why should I take a hypothesis by which I explain only one fact? If by one hypothesis, one principle, if I expect more facts, then I will definitely go for that. And therefore, principle of economy is everywhere, which we call it as a Laghavaha. And Laghava is considered as a Laghava means with a few factors, few parameters, you explain more things. Well, definitely, then you should not imagine more factors. That is, in Shastra, it is welcomed all the time. And Gaurava is considered as a dosha. It means if you imagine a lot of factors and then you are able to explain any phenomena, then they say it is not good. So definitely, so with one hypothesis, we are explaining both the examples. What is that principle? I mean, hypothesis means example. I mean, principle. What is that principle? Kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupam. That's all. That's our principle. By this principle, we explain Rajju Sarpa also. We can explain pot clay or a gold ornament, etc. also. And we can explain Jagat and Brahman also. The relationship of Jagat and Brahman also, ultimately. So, irrespective of a parinama or a vivarta, well, there is such a there is such a thing called adhishthanam as a reality. And what appears in that adhishthanam, it may be a pot or a snake or a ornament, well, that is kalpitam. And so, in order to identify, well, all, we have, to cover example as well as this Brahman Jagat, etc., well, we have to assume three realities: Parmarthika, Vyavarika, and Pratibhasika also. And general principle is Kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupam. And so this three-tier theory of this Advaita philosophy, ontological status of the whole creation, well, ultimately we divide into these three categories. So, sometime Advaiti, well, definitely calls Vyavarika and Pratibhasika together as a Vyavarika only, for sake of convenience, and then it is a two-tier theory, Vyavarika and Parmarthika. So, sometime you won't find a Pratibhasika has been mentioned at all. You will generally find a Vyavarika. That's how many people take an example of this pot and our clay. Many. In fact, Upanishad takes that example of a Vyavarika only. By that we go to the relationship of Brahman and Jagat, and then there you have to say Paramarthika reality also. But anyway, so this is a thing. So this three-tier theory generally, basically gives much more accommodation for all kinds of objects, experiences in the world. Because we have a dream experience also. We have this shell silver, we have this rope snake. Then, well, definitely, now those objects, how to explain? So, okay, Pratibhasika also should be included. Sometimes Pratibhasika, Vyavarika, they combine together, they club together also. That is also there. Anyway, now one person from he was a phenomenologist, and phenomenology is basically is a philosophical study of structure of experience and consciousness, and he does not believe in this shastra. To such a person, how we will prove this three-tier reality in the creation? It's a very challenging thing, but Advaitin definitely jumps into that also. And so his question was, could you explain that what is the phenomenological ground for this two-tier or a three-tier philosophy of yourself? He's asking to Advaitin. And knowing that this person will not accept the Shruti, because Brahman means a Paramarthika, etc. So you have to bring a Shruti, but if you don't bring, then how will you explain that there is something called Paramarthika? Well, but then there is a attempt to explain that also. The three-tier theory of Advaitin can be explained also without going into Shruti. Shruti is, of course, finally the proof. But to a phenomenologist, we explain, we reconstruct this basically in terms of a phenomenology. And as I told you, it's nothing but phenomenology is basically a philosophical study of a structure of experiences and consciousness also. Now, if I reconstruct that theory, it is like this. The first thing is the most ultimate principle is, in terms of reality, is consciousness. I will not use the word Brahman. We know everything is on the basis of this principle. Everything we can explain on the basis of a principle, a principle of accepting consciousness as a final reality. We will not use Paramarthika, etc. And suppose if that person questions the very principle, consciousness, well, then we will ask. Suppose he says, how do you say that the consciousness is there? So, on what basis, then we ask him, on what basis do you question that? If you say the consciousness is there or not, ultimately you have to resort to your means of knowledge, right? Something is there or not. Ultimately, you have to resort to your pramana. Without pramana, a prameya cannot be proven. So, we are asking him question. If you are asking us a question that how will you say consciousness is a final reality, then we ask him that do you question regarding this consciousness is based on pramana or not? And he has to say, yeah, based on pramana, because through my means of knowledge I am not able to see consciousness, etc. Well, then we say this pramana, the very pramana, the means of knowledge, also depends upon the consciousness. Entire pramana pravritti basically is, now I am talking to you. So, means of knowledge also are conscious. I am telling him that means of knowledge also are conscious is due to consciousness. And therefore, ultimately, pramana also function because the consciousness is there, and therefore consciousness is a final reality. And therefore, ultimately you cannot question it. And in our case, we have already seen that entire pramana pravritti is due to adhyasa. I have already talked about it. And adhyasa is there because of a identification with the body, identification of the self or the consciousness with the body. Because of that, the pramata is there, and because of that, there is a pramana pravritti. And due to pramana pravritti, you say something is or something is not. So ultimately, consciousness is a final reality. And pramata itself won't be possible if consciousness is not there, naturally. And without pramata, pramana pravritti itself won't take place in order to explain the existence of a thing or not. And therefore, basically, phenomenologist also accepts that the consciousness is ultimate principle. It's a presupposition that it is not a part of experience. It is basically a foundation or a basis of the whole experience. And based on that, based on consciousness alone, anything else can be questioned, based on a pramana. So, well, definitely anything is there or not. Very existence of any in the creation is possible based on a pramana. But the pramana itself is possible is due to consciousness. And therefore, consciousness is prior to the experience. Entire experience playing a triple role, basically, ultimately, pramata, karta, bhokta, etc. Having triads in everything, well, possible due to consciousness, which always transcends all the three. So pramata, pramanam and prameya, all the three are basically pervaded by the consciousness, and consciousness transcends all the time, all the three. So it's not that the consciousness basically transforms itself into pramata, pramana, prameya. Consciousness is always transcendental, and pramata, pramana, prameya is basically superimposed upon this consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is always there before the experience. Any experience as a pramata takes place. Experience of a pramata, pramana, prameya, etc. takes place. Consciousness is ever there. So, karta, karma and karanam, or bhokta, bhogya, bhogam, etc. Any triad, basically, in which there are various experiences, before that consciousness is presupposed. And therefore, without that, nothing, no experience is possible. Therefore, there is no question of experiencing consciousness ultimately to prove its existence. Well, before the experience takes place, there is a presupposition of consciousness, and therefore consciousness is the ultimate reality, which definitely does not require any kind of it need not become an object of experience by which you say, yeah, consciousness is. Anything else, yeah, is existence, definitely require pramana and pramata, everything, but consciousness is presupposed before that also. And therefore consciousness is the final reality. Even phenomenologist who does not accept Shastra also accepts this, yeah, that is true, that without consciousness no experience is possible. And therefore there is no need of experiencing consciousness and thereby telling that, yeah, consciousness exists. There is no need. So, final reality, we will not now use Paramarthika Satyam, etc. Will for temporary, is consciousness. Now, second, whatever is affirmed by the consciousness cannot be denied. Whatever is affirmed by consciousness cannot be denied. Supposing by means of consciousness I define a table, or define table means the table is existent, table is there, etc. So consciousness is evident, and it functions through the antakarana, through as a pramata, etc., and through visual perception. Well, I say it is stable. Once, consciousness affirms, existence of a table, etc., it cannot be denied by anything. This is the second principle. Third thing is, whatever is denied by the consciousness cannot be affirmed. Before that I said, whatever is affirmed by consciousness cannot be denied, like table, right? Table is there. Ultimately, due to consciousness only experience takes place, and therefore, once consciousness affirms the existence of an object, basically, then it is not denied. Then I am saying, whatever is denied by consciousness cannot be affirmed. Like initially itself consciousness tells you that, tells you means you can understand. Not that Swamiji, consciousness speaks something. This is, in terms of consciousness we are discussing. Ultimately as a pramata, etc. So, initially consciousness tells me that it is not a snake. So, once consciousness denies that the particular thing is not there, I still can't persist and say, no, snake is there. No. So, basically, three things are there now. Consciousness, self-evident, ultimately means final reality. And then second thing is consciousness, what is affirmed by consciousness cannot be denied, like table, etc. And third thing is, whatever is denied by consciousness cannot be affirmed, like this rope snake, etc. or any other thing. So three things are there. And here we say that what is pratibhasika vastu basically, because it is we say the snake etc. is basically sublated by something else, rope etc. And therefore, well, the rope has a higher ontological status, and the rope also is affirmed by the consciousness. Therefore, rope cannot be denied. This snake is not there, is well denied by the consciousness, and therefore, definitely, it has a less reality. Once it is denied by consciousness, you cannot affirm it that it is there. Snake is there, etc. You cannot say. So snake has it is sublated compared to the rope, and therefore snake we call it as a pratibhasika vastu, which is sublated by the rope. But the rope cannot be denied by the consciousness. Rope is not denied by the consciousness. Therefore, it has a higher status in terms of a reality, ontological status, and ultimately consciousness is there. Now between snake is gone, pratibhasika, that is okay. Now between rope and consciousness, is it a same reality or a different reality? No. Even rope is sublated by consciousness. That is the beauty. Because when you say rope, there is a rope consciousness. But it is not all the time, in all the places, in all the periods of time. It is not there. Once it is, right now it is rope consciousness. And afterwards it is computer consciousness. And afterwards it is, a clip consciousness. Afterward it is tree consciousness. And therefore, basically, between an object of consciousness and consciousness, also, the one thing is all the time getting changed and therefore sublated. Consciousness is the one which never goes, never comes. And therefore, what comes and goes, even though initially it has been affirmed by the consciousness, but finally it is denied also. And therefore, consciousness is the final reality, which is never sublated. Even rope is sublated. And compared to rope and snake, even snake is sublated first and rope is affirmed. Rope is sublated and now consciousness is affirmed. And consciousness is never sublated. And therefore we have a three-tier reality in the creation of various objects. Entire cosmos, well, consisting of varieties of objects, have this three-tier reality. That's how we prove that. So since if there is a Shruti support, well, easily we can prove, but this person basically, he doesn't accept. So this person wants to understand in form of a phenomena. And definitely, well, so because he's a phenomenologist, well, so there is no point in quoting scriptures, etc. So we said this much. Whatever consciousness affirms is real, accepted by both, and whatever consciousness denies cannot be real. And well, so whatever consciousness denies cannot be real, means cannot be affirmed. So once consciousness says it is not real, then you can't say no, it is there. It is not. So the evidence of consciousness is of course unquestionable. It can't be challenged by anything else. If at all we want to challenge, we will challenge through pramana. Whether consciousness is there or not, prove. Okay, ready. But then which means of knowledge you want to employ? Eyes, ears, mind, what? Any pramana by which you want to prove the existence of consciousness, the very pramana functions due to consciousness. And therefore, pramana itself has to depend upon consciousness. Whatever depends on consciousness cannot set aside consciousness. And so consciousness ultimately is the Brahman. That's a final reality. So this is in an example, rope, snake, or a pots and etc. Well, that is just for analogy, but ultimately we will have to accept a reality which is a final reality which cannot be sublated in any circumstances. So whatever depends on consciousness, well, cannot set aside consciousness. Like if I am dependent on, suppose a big person is dependent totally on somebody, and without which, that person, without whom the existence of that person is not possible, suppose, and still he keeps on denying about that person on which his existence is dependent. it is meaningless. And therefore, ultimately consciousness is the basis, adhishthanam of everything in the creation, a pratibhasika or a vyavarika, whatever, ultimately. And therefore, snake is a adhishthanam in a rope, and rope ultimately has adhishthanam in the consciousness. So, ultimately it's adhishthanam of everything in the creation, and therefore, whole world depends on consciousness, and therefore the world cannot set aside consciousness. That's a final reality, which we call in Shastra as a Atma or Brahman. And therefore, there is no point in saying Asti Asti. If one wants to know Brahman, never go by Asti, only go by Asmi. That's the thing. Never go by Asti. This is okay to say Asti Bhati Priyam Chaiva, etc., Nam Rupam, and this all, these three is Brahman, and this is okay. Never go by Asti, even though Asti is Brahman in anything. But if really one wants to know this Brahman is to be known only as Atma. So Asmi only is the important thing, not Asti. Because anywhere Asti is dependent upon this Asmi. Anywhere Asti is ultimately dependent on this thing, and therefore really knowing Brahman as Atma only, because it's available only as Atma. There is no choice. Brahman does not have a choice, and Atma also does not have a choice. And therefore Brahman is available only as Atma. And therefore Atma means Asmi. That's all. And therefore this is Pujya Swami's statement. Never go by Asti. Knowing Brahman, well, ultimately you should know it as Atma, and therefore Asmi only is important. Anyway, so this Khyativada has taught us great lessons. All Darshanikas ultimately have to deal with this Khyativada, and this discussion is very thorough in terms of we have seen that Adhyasa, etc., Khyati also. Now when we consider this relation between pot and clay, now we are moving a little ahead. So when we consider a relation between, I'm just briefing what we have done. So when we consider this relation between pot and clay, it's a relation of a samasattakaha. Two objects are related, have a same ontological status. Clay has empirical reality, pot also has empirical reality. Still pot is kalpitam. It exists only in a namesake, namamatram, right? Having form. Actually what exists in terms of a nature, substance, is clay only. Clay is adhishthanam on which pot is superimposed, called kalpitam. In case of a rope snake, two objects which are related to each other do not have a same satta. Both have a different ontological status, and rope has empirical status, snake has a pratibhasika satta, phenomenal reality, etc., or a subjective reality. And here also snake is kalpita. Again the same thing, existence of the kalpita. So kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupam. Anyway, so whether parinama or a vivarta example, relationship parinama, samasattaka or vishamasattaka, principle is same. And that principle we are employing in a Brahman Jagat relationship, or the relationship between I and the Jagat, ultimately, not Brahman. I and the Jagat. The relationship between I and the Jagat is either, for that you to understand that relationship, you may take any example. Principle is this, and that is a principle of economy, and it is this kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupam. This is how it is. Now we have bypassed the example of a blue sky. That is also again kalpitam. So that is really a typical thing. In case of a blue sky, which all see, these are all subjective, etc., etc. So okay, Rajju Sarpa, etc. So in case of a blue sky, everyone see blue. And adhishthanam is the ether or akasha, they call space. And that akasha, adhishthanam, is perceived blue. Like the rope is perceived basically as a snake, same way that ether or a space is perceived as a blue. Generally we say akasha is a niravayavam, etc., kind of niravayavam, and it's a very good example for Brahman. Basically very near the closest example or closest analogy in order to understand Brahman, nature of Brahman. This Akasha they give as example in Shastra in many places. Anyway, now how this is also perceptual error. This is blue sky. This is snake, like that this is blue sky, is also perceptual error. Now here the things are a little different. See, adhishthanam of a blue sky is ether, etc., Akasha. Then basically, how will you know that adhishthanam is a space? Like in a rope snake, well, you are very simple. That snake is a superimposed thing and rope is a reality, adhishthanam, because I am able to see the rope. Right? And therefore, that rope, which is equally perceptible. Now, of course, due to ignorance of that, I see it as a snake and I call it as a perceptual error. Now, here also you are saying a perceptual error. This is a blue sky. Now, have you seen the adhishthanam space? How do you say that it is a perceptual error without adhishthanam? Because you said kalpitasya adhishthanam eva swarupam. You say the blueness is kalpita. There is nothing called blue sky. And therefore the blueness on the space is superimposed. Snakeness is superimposed upon rope. Potness is superimposed upon the clay. But the clay, adhishthanam, the rope, etc., all are perceptible. Now here, the space is perceptible, do you say? Space is not perceptible thing. Space is not perceptible. Then how do you arrive at this, that this is adhyasa here, perceptual error? How do you say? That is the question. So, no. We infer the space, because this accommodates very large objects. Anything it accommodates, right here in the space, big stars and all are accommodated. And therefore we infer space. If you go by inference about adhishthanam, the space is inferred space, then where is perceptual error? Where is perceptual error? You say it's a error in a perception. Now the adhishthanam itself is inferred. Where is the error in perception? So that is the issue. And therefore ultimately we will have to, because adhishthanam is perceptible, then you say, okay, instead of rope I see snake. Instead of this I see this, etc., etc. Instead of a shell, I see silver. And you say it is kalpita and the adhishthanam is the reality, etc. Oh, that's fine. But here you cannot call perceptual error because you should, the adhishthanam also should be perceived. Blueness is perceived, that is okay. But that's a kalpita. Adhishthanam also, the locus of kalpita, locus of adhyasa also should be perceived by you. Then only you can call perceptual error. Now, when I am talking about whether space is perceptible or not, now you are saying it is inferred. Therefore, it is not a perceptual error. It's an inferential error or something we have to say. So that is the issue. Then, we say that this Akasha is a Sakshi Bhasyam. It is perceptible, not through senses, but through witness, consciousness. Akasha, Kala, Desha, Kala, both. Then we give few more examples also. Desha, Kala, all are Sakshi Bhasya. All are perceptible, definitely perceptible, but not through senses. Akasha is not perceptible by the eyes. To see through the eyes, Akasha should have some color, some form, something. It is not there. Therefore, Akasha has a guna, but that guna is not available for the eyes. And therefore, Akasha is a Sakshi Bhasya. Time also is a Sakshi Bhasya. Yeah. No one sees the time. I am seeing the time. Where is time? And what color it has? What form has? The time has. What form? It has no form. So it's all Sakshi Bhasya. And therefore, basically, so first, it is Sakshi Bhasya. Otherwise, first, if you don't say that, then the Akasha or the ether basically becomes a object of inference. So first something is to be inferred. First something, that adhishthanam is to be inferred, and then we have to say that something is superimposed, that blueness, etc. is superimposed upon there. So then we are moving away from the perceptual area to some other area, and therefore here there is a perceptual problem only. You say this is blue sky, then it's a definitely perceptual problem. Then regarding adhishthanam also, you have to talk in terms of perception only. You can't say that adhishthanam is inferred and on that I am now superimposing something on that inferential object. No, that's not the thing. Then you are totally moving away from the perceptual error. And so if it is a perceptual error, you know, the experience also that this is blue sky, then definitely adhishthanam also you should talk only in terms of perception. And it is, Akasha is perceptible, yes, through Sakshi, not through senses. Sakshi Bhasya. Anyway, and so it is a perceptual error, and adhishthanam is known through Sakshi. And blueness, of course, is known through your eyes, etc. So Sakshi Bhasya. So we cite an example of a case where all suffer such limitations. Everyone sees it is just blue. Now, regarding this, because we are discussing this ontological status, Gaudapada Karika, well, basically in Mandukya, proves this Pratibhasika Vyavarika very beautifully. What Gaudapadacharya says is Pratibhasika Vastu exists for one time. He calls it as a Chitta Kala. And Vyavarika Vastu, well, exists for Dvaya Kala, for existing for at two different times. I'll explain you that. So at 2 points of time. So Chitta Kala means, Pratibhasika Vastu exists at 1 point of time, and Vyavarika Vastu exists at 2 points of time. That's all. Chitta Kala and Dvaya Kala. Dvaya means 2. So 2 points, basically. 2 points of time. So Rajju Sarpa exists, well, at 1 point of time. What is that? Rajju Sarpa exists at that time, at that place, and by that particular person. That's what I was telling before, that I would connect here. So this Rajju Sarpa, I said about Apurva Satta, if you remember, I used that word Apurva Satta. Na Purvam Vidyate iti Apurvam. Before that it was not. Only existing at the time of experiencing. At the time of experiencing by that particular experiencer and at that particular time only. That is called Chitta Kala. So Pratibhasika Vastu basically exists at that time, at that place, and by that person only, like Rajju Sarpa. Now empirical objects called Vyavarika Vastu, well, according to Gaudapadacharya, exist at 2 points of time. This, like this table, which is Vyavarika Vastu, existed before I came to the room and before my perception, and well, right now also it exists. So Vyavarika Vastu exists at 2 points of time. Before I came in this room, at that time also it was existent, let us call time T1. And right now when I am experiencing also it is existent. Let's call it as a time T2. So Vyavarika Vastu existing at 2 points of time, before and now, past and present. And well, I don't know what will happen to at a third point of time. After right now it's there, but after this, what will happen, I don't know. Somebody may take away the table, or may destroy the table, come and destroy the table, etc. Dismantle it, etc. Well, I don't know about next moment. So empirical objects exist before and now. Pratibhasika Vastu exists at that moment only, by that person and on that particular locus only. So this is how Gaudapadacharya sees the difference between two types of objects having a different reality. Pratibhasika Vastu exists only at a Chitta Kala. So definitely, and Vyavarika Vastu exists definitely at a 2 Kala, before and now. One more point is Pratibhasika Vastu exists only when you perceive. and our perception and existence of an object go together. That's all. Then it is pratibhasika. And so only when I perceive it exists. Like dream objects exist at the time of perception. This is a particularity of a pratibhasika vastu. And so there is no such thing as a ajnata satta for a pratibhasika vastu. Ajnata satta means what? Existence of an object at the time of ignorance also. No. No. Pratibhasika vastu, well, I am ignorant of the rope snake, and still rope snake exists. No. No. So basically, pratibhasika vastu exists only when you perceive. So your perception and existence of object are together. So anyway, and so that in this way he extends, our all antahkarana dharma basically, our subjective states like pleasure, pain and other things, well, definitely they also exist like this. When I experience, they are there. Then afterwards, it is just a memory kind of a thing. It is not existent. When you experience, it is there. If you don't experience, it is not there. That is how they call Jiva Srishti. All this, it may be a rope snake, or it may be a dream, or it may be in a waking, these experiences of a pain right now. So when I experience pain, that time it is there. And like suppose someone goes to a doctor, I'm just giving an example. Doctor asks, do you have a pain right now in back? Well, he says, I don't feel pain. Yet it is there. Suppose if he says, I don't feel pain, but still it is there. No one can say that, right? So when you experience, at that time it exists. So especially I'm talking about the various moods in our mind, which we call Jiva Srishti, is also like this. Dream also is a Jiva Srishti. Sarpa also is a Jiva Srishti on a rope. And same way, this also is a Jiva Srishti. So ultimately, Gaudapadacharyaji's the intention is to come for these experiences. But the person experiences varieties of the moods, etc. So when he experiences, they are existent. When he does not experience, they are not existent. Definitely not. And therefore, so this is how he identifies defines rather pratibhasika vastu and Vyavaharika vastu. So all kind of thinking takes place in our mind basically, which I know, of course, I experience. And unless you tell somebody, no one else knows. And so others have got a privileged access to your thinking. But for you also, when you experience, they are there. This access in your is denied to others basically, unless you tell to someone. But whether God knows or not, what is going on in your mind, well, it is let us keep it aside right now. But let's say he knows, because he is a karma phala data and he has to take into account our moods also behind the action, our bhavana, etc. also, and therefore, we should say he knows. But what we are saying is ultimately varieties of the things which you experience in the mind in terms of moods, emotions, etc. So when you experience, they exist. Otherwise, they don't exist. That is also a Jiva Srishti. We have to remember, if others do not have access, it is a Jiva Srishti. If others do not have an access, unless you tell, others do not have an access to your cloud or your world in the mind, it is a Jiva Srishti. It is pratibhasika. Great thing. We should not go much into that because he wants to convey that whole samsara which you experience is a pratibhasika. Acharya's contention is that, like a Rajju Sarpa, like a dream, in waking also what you experience, in terms of this, varieties of the moods, etc. When you experience, they are there. When you are not experiencing, they are not there. And it is true. Rajju Sarpa also, when you experience, it is there. When you are not experiencing, it is not there. Dream also, when you experience, it is there. When you don't experience, it is not there. You may say after memory, oh, it was there and like that. That is a different issue. That you can say even for a Rajju Sarpa also. Yeah, I experienced Sarpa on that rope. What about now? No, no, right. So basically, Pratibhasika, his definition of Pratibhasika is beautiful. How this Jiva Srushti and Vyavarika Ishwar Srushti, etc. Okay. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.